Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dragonfly Heart Medicine Radio. I am Kristen, and today I have a special guest. We're going to be talking about some things we have yet to really talk about on the podcast, so that is exciting. And I'll go ahead and have her introduce herself and then just tell us a little bit about why she chose to join us on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me. Nice to meet everybody virtually. My name is Elyse Mickalonis, and I teach yoga just outside of Boston in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I also teach paddleboarding yoga, and I run, and I have a 13-year-old beagle named Clark, who's still very active, but for whatever reason today is just napping next to me. So it's nice to see everybody.
And so, why did you pursue yoga, especially wanting to be an instructor?
Sure. So back in 2012, I was working as a journalist, and life was super demanding and crazy. And I was just really just kind of grinding it out and looking for more. I felt like this work robot: wake up, get ready, go to work, eat, keep working, go home, eat, go to bed, repeat, like every day. And that wasn't just me. You know, I grew up loving nature, and I grew up loving having this freedom because I grew up in upstate New York. So being outside and being able to put my feet on the ground and just be able to be creative and get fresh air and just have time. I felt that I was missing that and that I was lacking that. And I was really looking to tap back into it. I did a lot of artwork growing up, and I loved being active. I did a lot of different sports, and I did theater, and I felt that journalism would be a good blending of all of that. But I'd heard that it was super demanding, but of course, you know, they prepare you as much as they can in school. And then when you're thrown out into the real world, all of a sudden you're working like midnight shift and staying as long as you covering fires and putting, basically I was an MMJ, which means a multimedia journalist. So I had no photographer. So I was doing all of the shooting, writing, editing myself for TV, which was great. And it was exciting. It was an awesome first job, but it was, it kind of sucked the life out of me too. You meet a lot of great people, but then you meet, you run into some unfortunate situations. So I was just looking for more. And it actually happened that I had been looking to interview someone for a story on how to stay well around Super Bowl Sunday. And the interview I was supposed to have fell through. And I just stumbled upon this yoga studio in Johnson City, New York, called Yoga Body Shop. And they were like, yeah, sure. You can come and talk to us. We'll talk to you about wellness and, how to enjoy life, but how to find balance. And I went there. It was really great yoga teachers, Ron and Linda and Lisa. And I eventually met Terry and a whole bunch of other people there, but they really introduced me to yoga and meditation. And at first it was for a story, but very quickly they invited me to come back. And my first class, I believe, was Valentine's Day that following year. And I actually went, and it was hot yoga. So I was swearing in my head the whole time. I was like, what is this? I thought this was supposed to be stress-free. And my ego was coming up so hard. And I was just very much like slipping on the mat. But, at the end of the practice in Shavasana, it clicked. And I was like, oh, I don't really have to be on all the time. This is about being in the moment. It's not about like looking around the room and seeing what other people are doing. And it's not about rushing from place to place or pose to pose. One of my teachers, Terry Ross, always said to us, you're on your little 3-foot island. Stay on your island and just enjoy your island and practice on your island. And that really resonated with me. And the more that I kept practicing and the more that I kept learning that yoga wasn't just a process of physicality, that it had 8 different limbs, and meditation's just, part of it as well. But doing no harm, ahimsa, really, really just found a place in my heart, especially in that career that I had that was so much about how many clicks can we get, on a story, and having to cover a lot of the darker aspects of humanity. We would do happy stories, but if something popped up, like, a homicide or a fire, we would drop that kind of what we would call a fluff story and pick that up. And it really just helped me find balance. And then I ended up in North Carolina as a yoga, as a journalist, and I was looking for yoga again. I was looking for kind of a spiritual family, to be honest. And I had always wanted to teach yoga because I loved the way that my yoga teachers had been able to hold space for me in a time that was very unstable, right? It was just kind of my first job, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And then all of a sudden, I get this job in this other city, and I have to pack up and move after 2 years. And I had also had a cancer scare in the process too. And they were able to help me recover from a surgery that I had, and first recover with meditation instead of just jumping back into movement, which is what I really wanted to do. They were like, try meditating first, then try gentle movement. Don't just jump back in. And so just all of the lessons and everything that they shared with me, I was like, I really want to be able to help people in that way too. So I had found Audrey in Free Spirits Yoga in Greensboro, North Carolina, and she was having a yoga teacher training. It's just one of those things that lined up perfectly. It was all those synchronicities, right? I was struggling with income as a journalist because you don't make a lot of money in that field. And I was like, I have just enough money to do this yoga teacher training and still maintain, groceries and everything else and lifestyle. And it just all fell into place. And she was like, come to one of my yoga classes and just see if it's the right fit for you. And I went, and we did this really great cave of the heart meditation, and talked a lot about the medicine of animals and, spirit animals. And it just really, really cut deep into me, into my roots from upstate New York and growing up. And it was kind of the perfect blend of what I was seeking when I first became a journalist, what I was seeking through yoga, and then just her yoga teacher training really just brought everything up that I just needed in that moment, not only for teacher training, but also to do some really nice inner guide work, as Audrey likes to call it. So that's kind of how I came into it. And then at one point I was doing the journalist career during the day, and then at night I was teaching yoga, and I was like, these are two completely different worlds. Like, what am I doing? But it was really nice. I feel like it gave me some more tools in my toolbox to hold space for people that were going through tragedy during my day job. So that's, long story short, how I got into teaching yoga. But yeah, I just kind of fell into my lap. But I really think, I was manifesting it. I just didn't know what manifesting was at that time. I was just thinking about it all the time and putting it out there. And, it felt like it just kind of fell into my lap. But I think I probably, tried to call everything in. So.
Wow, that is quite a story. And I feel like so many of us, you mentioned finding balance, and that is something I feel like so many of us are seeking. And we're overworked and we're overtired. Sometimes even when we are doing a job we love, like, at the core, you really enjoy journalism, but it was like all these extra hours and the nature of some of the content you had to write about was difficult. And I can relate to that. Like, I'm a high school teacher and I absolutely love teaching, but like sometimes it's like the long hours that really get to me. It's like, if I could teach just half a day, or just teach part-time, it would be great. And I love how you mentioned yoga also helped you find like you're like a spiritual family that you could really connect with. And so and you mentioned you've done like hot yoga. Could you briefly, for maybe people who aren't as familiar with the different types of yoga, just briefly explain some of the different yoga practices?
There are so many now, especially in the Western world. You have kind of all different kinds of yoga that's been, kind of thrown together, at least in the Western world, like goat yoga and beer yoga and all of that. But at its core, yoga is more about the hatha and the raja, thousands and thousands of years old practice going all the way back. And it's not just about movement. Yoga is to yoke. It's a union of mind, body, spirit. And there's so much more that goes into it than just the physical poses that we see on Instagram of people doing all these really pretty things. And I joke sometimes with my partner, I'm like, it almost looks like gymnastics sometimes. But there's so many different kinds. Like I started with hot yoga. The kind that I started with was Baptiste yoga, which is close to an Iyengar kind of practice in that it's really about a lot of alignment. So even though we were practicing in a yoga studio that was very, very hot, and I honestly can't remember what the temperature was. It wasn't a warm yoga studio. It was a hot yoga studio because there are warm classes as well that are usually like 80 degrees. Hot yoga is usually warmer than that, at least what I've practiced. But you're detoxing the whole time. So you go in and you're just slowly getting into the poses, working on the alignment, and then you go through a vinyasa flow, which is a lot of movement and a lot of breath work. And they also would do ujjayi breath, which also warms the body from within inside. So it was a lot of heat. And for someone just starting, I was like, what's up with this? What's going on? Like, why is it so hot in here? I'm slipping all over the place. And, the need to perform, right? A lot of us feel that need to perform as adults, because for whatever reason, when we're kids, if we like fall, it's okay. But when we're adults, it's not okay for some reason. And every time I slipped in that class, I was beating myself up. And my yoga teacher, Terry, would be like, don't do, like, it's fine. Just wobble, fall out of it, laugh, come back into it, like smile. It's okay. So, it was hot, it was sweaty, but I really think as much as I was detoxing, by sweating and like getting all of the toxins out of my body, I was like detoxing the mind and the spirit a bit too, and letting go of those old stories, those kinds of, you're an adult, you have to be serious, like you can't mess up. You're on TV, you have this thing, this image or whatever, so it was just kind of great to be able to just take that weight off and just say, okay, like this is my authentic self. Audrey always says, like, you don't have to wear a mask. That's one of the lessons that I really love from her. And it was just so liberating to be like, right, I could do this stuff when I was younger and nobody would say anything. Like, why do I care so much now? Right. So being able to be okay with like slipping or falling was a big lesson that really came up for me during the hot yoga. So that's just, one type of yoga. When I practiced and studied with Audrey, I believe she was, it was more of like a blend of like the holy science of yoga which has more hatha and raja roots. So more of a kind of older lineage going back, some of the newer asanas and poses coming in, but then mixing it with, her shamanic teachings about spirit animals and things of that nature that she learned from her teachers and mentors. So there's a lot of different types. You could go to a yin yoga class and it would be completely different than a hot yoga class. You could go to a restorative yoga class, which is just, and everybody, when they think restorative yoga, they just look at it like, you're just laying down the whole time, right? It's restorative for a reason. We're so busy. We don't need to be in a hot yoga class all the time. We don't need to be in a vinyasa class sweating and moving and breathing all the time, in a rapid way. Sometimes restorative is needed, and restorative yoga is a beautiful thing that you just let yourself be held by bolsters and blocks and props, and you have a blanket. And some of the best restorative classes I've gone to will dim the lights or have candlelight, and sometimes they'll have like violinists come in, and it's just inviting you to slow down and let the earth hold you and not have to fight against that. So there's really so many different kinds. If you're looking for a yoga class and you're like, I don't know if I can do all these crazy twists and poses, maybe try a restorative yoga class, especially if you feel like you're giving so much of yourself during the day that you just feel like you can't be on all the time. Restorative would be a great option to try. We have sun salutations in most yoga classes where You could find any of those on Google if you wanted to, but also moon salutations are quite lovely too. Those are, they almost like they start from like one pose, they go all the way to another pose, and it's almost like you're rewinding a tape and you're going all the way back to the first pose that you had. So you don't have to know 1,000 different poses to practice yoga. You don't have to be doing a whole bunch of different twists. You don't have to be moving a lot. You can have pillows and blankets in your home. I mean, I've done some of the best restorative yoga I've ever done has been at home, and I haven't even had like bolsters or blocks. I've had just traditional things that I've laid on the bed. So I mean, you don't have to do too much to enjoy the benefits of it. One of the greatest poses that I love is called legs up the wall, and you literally scoot your sit bones over to the wall, and you can put some blankets under yourself, or you could be even on your bed, depending on if you have a headboard or not, and just put your legs up the wall with your back on the floor, on a mat, or on the bed, and the heart doesn't have to work as hard. You're letting the blood go toward the heart, and it's a really great pose. It helps with anxiety, it helps with insomnia, and all you're doing is laying on your back with the legs in the air, right? It's just a really, really nice restorative pose. So even if you just try that and breathe there for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 10 minutes, see if you can just settle in and just kind of quiet the mind a little bit. And don't get too hard on yourself too if your mind starts wandering, right? I think a lot of us, when we start learning to quiet the mind, we're like, it has to be off completely. It doesn't have to be off completely. It's fine. When we meditate, thoughts will come up. We're human beings. It's natural. I always talk to my students and I say, if thoughts come up, they're like twigs moving past you on a river. Acknowledge them. They're there. Okay, thank you. And let them pass along. The more that we resist, sometimes things persist. So if you're like, I shouldn't be thinking about dinner. Why am I thinking about dinner? What am I going to have for dinner? Oh gosh, I'm still thinking about it. You're going to keep thinking about it. Just be like, yep, I'm going to think about dinner later. That's great. Thanks so much. Okay, let me come back to this. Just acknowledge it. Don't try to push it away. So yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of yoga, and you don't have to be a gymnast to enjoy it.
So yeah, you said so many really great things. I want to take some time to just kind of summarize and pick out some highlights that really resonated with me, because I do yoga almost every day. But I love how you mentioned, there's so much of this need to perform and this need to push ourselves in so many aspects of our life, even in yoga. So I've been to there's some yoga studios where it does seem like they're really just focusing on the physicality. But I liked how you mentioned, that there's just so many different types of yoga. And sometimes we really do just need the gentle restorative. And I mean, I love how you said, just allowing the earth to hold you and to just be present with your breath and with your thoughts and letting go of those expectations, because we are going to think. I don't think we ever truly don't ever have any thoughts, because that's just our mind's job, but we can slow them down and we don't always have to pay so much attention to them. And yeah, like something as simple as just laying with our legs up the wall is yoga. And just anytime that we're connecting our mind, body, our breath with our body, with our spirit, is yoga and all the different types. And I know we briefly talked before we actually hit record, and there's yet another type of yoga that is becoming really popular. That's paddleboard yoga. So I don't really know much about that. I've always wanted to try it, but I feel really kind of nervous about it. Could you share a little bit about your experience, what that's like teaching, and more information?
Yeah, I was actually first exposed to paddleboarding yoga through one of the teachers that I first took classes with at Yoga Body Shop in Binghamton, New York, or Johnson City, New York, rather. And her name is Tina, and she showed me and just kind of, I think I did a story with her on it. I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And then I started following Rachel Brathen on Instagram, who is the head of Island Yoga in Aruba. And her posts about it were just like, for some reason, it just really, I always saw myself teaching paddleboarding yoga. And I don't know if it's because I'm a Pisces and I'm just like, I love the water. And like my parents would have to drag me out of the water when I was a kid. I would literally be purple and pruny and I'd be like, I don't want to leave the ocean. Please don't make me leave. But I always was drawn to this. And it's just so beautiful because you're taking yoga and you're adding so much instability, right? We're all so much like, okay, like, let me find grounding, let me do this, let me do that. When you add the water, there's instability and it changes it so much. So I had been wanting to take uh, teacher training in Aruba at Island Yoga for probably about 5 years before I actually got it, like went out and like applied for the yoga teacher training and like gave myself permission to do this. For whatever reason, I wasn't giving myself permission to do this. I finally gave myself permission to do this, got accepted to the yoga teacher training and flew into Aruba and met someone who became one of my really good friends now. As soon as I got into the airport, she was also there for that. Her name's Bernadette. And so Bernadette and I took this yoga teacher training and it was just amazing. So basically paddleboarding yoga, you take your paddleboard, which is a gigantic personal flotation device. It's going to float. So even if you fall off, swim back over to it and hop back on it. It's fine. It'll always keep you afloat. And we paddle out and we anchor down and we practice yoga. And when we did our teacher training, one part of Aruba is like pretty calm and it has like a really nice slight breeze. And then when we did our endurance paddle, it was like choppy waters, like super windy. So we trained in both, really gave us respect for water and how water can change in an instant when you're practicing. And it really teaches you to go with the flow. Again, letting go of expectations, letting go of the need to perform, just kind of coming back to nature. And I've been teaching it now since 2019, maybe, I want to say. And I've been teaching with Stepio Adventures in Boston and Natick, right here in Massachusetts. I've also taught in Cape Cod on the ocean. And it's really great because we'll do like paddle the bay cleanups where we'll actually take like pollution out of the water and like garbage and things like that. So it really also helps you give back to the planet. But the beautiful thing about paddleboarding yoga is that so many people are afraid to fall in, and falling is all part of that practice. Everybody's like, am I going to fall in? I don't want to. I'm like, why? It's hot out. The water's refreshing. You're going to go for a little dip. You're going to get back on your board. They're like, yeah, but I don't want anybody to laugh at me. I'm like, we're going to clap. Like, I hope you understand, because that's the biggest step you can take in class, is allowing yourself to fall. And it's, once you do it, it's like the switch goes off in your head and you're like, oh, like I can do this. Like, it wasn't that bad. Like, it really was. I just fell in the water for a second, got back on the board. It wasn't that bad. I mean, of course, we have people that come to class that don't know how to swim, so they practice with a life jacket. And also we're, totally first aid, CPR certified, all of that. So, we keep a good eye on people if they do fall in. But, I had a gentleman in one of my classes last summer, and his daughters bought him the class pass as a gift for Father's Day. It's super cute. But they didn't go with him. He just kind of went by himself. So he was pretty nervous, but like excited. And he came in jeans and he's like, oh no, I probably should have worn jeans. I'm like, it's fine. I was like, if you fall in though, it might be a little heavy. And he was like, whoa, I'm going to fall in. I was like, you might. I was like, but it's okay if you fall in. I'm like, do you like swimming? He's like, yeah. I'm like, it's 90 degrees today. It's a perfect day to fall in. And he fell in. It was a little hard to swim in the jeans, but I mean, he literally after that point kept jumping in the water. And he was like, I haven't felt this way since I was a little kid. And I was like, I love it. And it just makes me so grateful to be part of people's journeys in that way, because of course we're paddling, we're going out, we're seeing these beautiful locations, whether it's Lake Cochituate in Natick, whether it's like the channel near Boston Harbor and there's a whole bunch of skyscrapers around us, or whether it's on the waters of Falmouth and the Cape and we see jellyfish sometimes, right? I mean, it really gives you permission to play, to go with the flow, but then also you find a new respect for poses that we take for granted on the land. All of a sudden, Warrior One and Warrior Two, they're not that easy. And we suddenly feel like we're being reborn again on the water. And we find I would say like more of a respect for those poses that all of a sudden we just kind of, they're like an afterthought in class if we practice for a long time. Like, warrior one, warrior two, let me go through the motions. We can't go through the motions on the water. The water is going to keep us present. So, I mean, you really have the opportunity to really just throw all of those thoughts aside, because if you don't, you're probably going to fall in. When you fall in, you're going to be like, oh, this happened. Oh my gosh, that's all that happened. It's fine. So it's really just a beautiful process of going with the flow, literally jumping in, falling in, kind of finding this rebirth on the water. And also too, Shavasana on the water, that corpse pose, that relaxation is so incredibly peaceful. I had a sunset class this past Wednesday night, and it was kind of windy at the beginning of class. I'll never take people out if it's too windy, but it was kind of windy. And then toward the end of class, the sun was setting. We had the lights come up over Boston. The seagulls were still going. We could smell the salt water in the air, and we were just laying down and just floating. We were anchored, so we weren't going anywhere, but we're just floating. And it really takes you somewhere else in your Shavasana. Just being able to flow and feeling a little more free, and being able to connect with nature in that way is just such a beautiful thing. So I would definitely say, a lot of people like yourself might be a little nervous to try it, but it's so beautiful. And once you give yourself permission to fall in, it's just something happens within you that you're like, that wasn't that bad. So yeah, I mean, those are just some of the reasons why I love it, and I love teaching it. And yeah, it's just kind of neat.
Wow. Yeah. Like I love just how you explained, just that allowing yourself to fall in, really just go with the flow. And I find that a really beautiful metaphor for life as well. Like allowing ourselves to fall apart, to break down, to fail, to make mistakes, and not taking life so seriously. I feel like sometimes I get really caught up in my head and in being perfect, even though I know perfect doesn't exist. And just, being terrified of really like allowing my emotions. And I think water is really good representation of like emotions too. Like, there's an ebb and a flow, and it's never really stagnant. And if we allow our emotions to get stagnant, then, just like stagnant water develops, parasites and things like that. It's really similar to us. And yeah, just that going with the flow. And that one guy, I love that story. He just like kept falling in, like, just got really in touch with his inner child and just really being free and having no worries and really being in the present moment, because that's what it's all about. And that's why I personally love yoga, is it helps me to be present. And even if that means my thoughts are racing, but I'm still like moving through that with all the poses. And so, yeah, how has yoga been there for you throughout your life and to continue to support you in your healing journey?
It has, oh gosh, it's been just a constant. And the people that I meet through yoga practice, whether it's on land or on water, it's just been such a beautiful journey. I mean, like I said, I had cancer scare back in 2012, and the yoga really just helped me with so much, not only physical, but emotional too, because you go through all the what ifs. And one of the things that we learn in yoga, don't have the expectations, like drop expectations, don't play the what if game. And then also too, something that I learned through my yoga journey was, there's that little voice inside you that tells you you're not good enough, you're not this, you're not that. And it's that self-bullying, right? It doesn't, like, we aren't born with that. That's not inherent to us. That's placed there by something else. So that voice in our head that we're like, oh, that's just me, like thinking, like, I always tell people, I'm like, if that like comes up, if you start hearing that inner dialogue, like question it. One of my yoga teachers, Terry, used to say, doubt your doubts. So I always hold that in my heart, like doubt your doubts, but also question that voice. Where is this thought coming from? And challenge it, because if a stranger said the things to you that you sometimes say to yourself, if somebody came up to the street on you and said all those things to you, you want to just be like, oh, okay. You would get mad. you would get offended. So why is it okay for us to say these things to ourselves? It's not. So I tell people, get mad, push back at that. Don't have that inner dialogue. Don't accept that. Change that inner dialogue to one of kindness and compassion. And it's going to take time, because for whatever reason, that inner voice gets put in our heads by society, by, maybe well-meaning people around us. Who knows where it comes from, but we're not born with it. So we don't have to carry it around all the time. It might come up every so often, but you can acknowledge it once you learn, like, this is not like my most authentic self. Like, why am I talking to myself this way? You can acknowledge it and then just be nice to yourself in that moment and be like, oh, I'm just having a bad day. Like, maybe I would have spoken to someone like that if it wasn't me, so just acknowledge that, try to correct that with a little loving kindness and compassion. And so that's something I try to work on, even if I feel like I messed up on like something like during the day and I'm like really beating myself up. I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm human, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not perfect. And of course, learning from whatever mistakes we make, right? Learning from falling, but then also like, not like when you're on the ground, not like kicking yourself even more, right? It's kind of like also like falling off the paddleboard. What are you going to do? You're just going to sit there and sink? No, start swimming, get back to the board, get back on, like, laugh about it. You fell in. Yeah, you messed up. It's fine. So that's helped me a lot, like learning those lessons. But then also too, the water aspect of it teaches us when to be strong like water and when to be gentle like water. Water's not always this pushing force. Sometimes it's very calm. And again, finding that balance is key. But yeah, I mean, whether through health things, through, gosh, I've had, people pass away in my life, as I'm sure many people have. I had my friend Jeff, his life was like taken way, way too soon a couple years ago. And he was always very supportive of my yoga journey. And I think about him a lot when I teach, because he was always like, you got to keep doing like this is what you love. And after he passed away, I've just been like, okay, like, I'm doing this for me, but also I want to do this a little bit for you too, because he was so supportive. So, it's just, it helped me also process a lot with like his passing too, because unfortunately, like he was shot, he was killed. So he was, I hate saying the word murdered for some reason. I used to say it all the time, like news reporting and all of that, but he was. So yoga helped me a lot with dealing with that grief. What do you do with that grief when someone passes away unexpectedly? And it doesn't have to be from homicide. It doesn't have to be from something like that. It could be from a car accident or things that just happen on a random Tuesday, things that we aren't prepared for. So yoga and meditation and learning to sit with emotions and process emotions and being kind to myself really helped me a lot with his passing. I mean, it's still hard, every year that it goes by, because he was only in his 20s when he died. But I think if I didn't have yoga and meditation and that kind of like spiritual community, spiritual family, it would have been a lot harder processing his passing. So, of course, it's helped me with that. It's helped me with health things, and it's just helped me really just find joy in life. Because I think a lot of times as adults, we do, like I said, get into that whole robotic way of living. But it's allowed me to give myself permission to enjoy life, which sounds so bananas, that we have to give ourselves permission to enjoy life as adults. But we just make time for the things that we enjoy, because sometimes we're like, oh no, like I don't have time to do this. Like, allow yourself time to rest, but also allow yourself time to enjoy the things you do, because life can be very, very short. So just, make the most of the present moment as you can, and feel the full, I always tell people, feel all the seasons of your emotions, right? I had a yoga teacher who was very well-meaning, who was just like, be a yes, say yes to everything. Like, find joy, like even when you're super sad, like find happiness. And when I met Audrey, she was like, feel everything, take the mask off, cry, do what you have to do. And I was like, yes, this is this is authentic. Because for a while, when I first started practicing with that particular teacher, I was just like, she's so happy all the time. Like, how am I not like happy all the time? And I was like, am I not practicing enough? Like, am I not? And it's very well meaning to tell people to be yes and find joy in even the hard moments, but it's almost an unattainable dream because we're human and we have these full seasons of emotions. And so when I took class and took teacher training with Audrey and met more people in the yoga community who were just like super authentic. And we're just like, yeah, take the mask off. You gotta feel, don't try to just, what do they call it? Like spiritual bypassing is I think what they call it now. And that really resonated with me so deeply. And I was like, oh, like I am still practicing yoga if I'm not happy all the time, or if something bad happens and I'm just like super sad about it. So I think that has helped with feeling all the seasons of my emotions. And so I always try when I'm holding space for other people, if they're just like, oh gosh, like, you're so positive. I'm like, yeah, today I'm positive. Like tomorrow I might not be. Tomorrow I might be having a bad day, might be a grouch. I might, be bad and naughty and have a cup of coffee and then have like a sugar crash. I'm not supposed to have those things, but hey, I'm human. But yeah, I just try to be realistic to people, and I always tell people just feel your emotions, process them. And that's one of the reasons why I do eventually want to get certified in trauma yoga, because I think it's super important to be able to hold space for people in a way that won't trigger anyone or any traumas. So I try to be careful with wording in class too, because I have some really, really great colleagues who teach trauma-informed yoga classes, and I've learned so much from them. So really just being authentic, but then also holding space for people in a way that is beneficial and safe as well. We want to make sure we're holding space for people in a nice, safe way. So that was a lot.
Yeah, so I think, kind of what I'm hearing from yoga at the end of the day is just about allowing everything. And yoga can be such a beautiful support in that. I know a lot of times people refer to yoga as a practice because it's always ongoing and shifting, and our bodies are a little bit different every day. And there's some days on our mat we're like, oh my gosh, like, this is so easy, I feel great. And the next day it's like, whoa, I can't even, like, child's pose hurts or whatever, even some of the simple things. But yeah, I'm just hearing like that yoga helps to really just get us in touch with what's really going on, and we can look deeper and use it as an opportunity to help us really feel into those things instead of just always avoiding them. I too have met the yoga teachers who were just like super excited, super happy, oh my gosh, all the time. And to me, when I like experience that, it's like exhausting. To me, I'm like, oh, it's just like they just don't feel authentic. And so I feel like the exhaustion of the energy it really takes to be somebody you're not, I guess. But yeah, we've getting close to wrapping up. So thank you for everything you shared. I feel like this is definitely what I'm going to like watch back again, because you said so many things. And sometimes when I'm interviewing people, I'm like really focused on like how to ask questions for the next thing, and I miss out on some things. But yeah, you definitely shared quite a lot, and thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you want to say about yourself or about yoga before we end?
I would just say that if anybody's interested in yoga, even if they're a little nervous, you can start with just an online class. It doesn't have to be a live class. You could even print out little flashcards of little poses. Even if you just try guided meditation, just if you're curious about something, give yourself permission, right? I think at the end of the day, some of the most beautiful things happen in life is when we give ourselves permission to try something new. And or if you're like me and you're a people pleaser and you're so used to saying yes to things, say no. That's still yoga. You're still taking care of yourself. You're not doing harm to yourself or others by saying no. Having boundaries is important. Yeah, so just try it if you want to try it. If you don't want to try it, don't try it. But many different kinds of yoga you can try that I'm confident that, even if you just lay down on your bed with your legs up the wall, you you're doing yoga, you're fine. Or even if you try not to hurt anybody or yourself during the day, you're practicing yoga, ahimsa. So yeah, I would say try it, and don't be afraid to take the mask off and be authentic. And yeah, if you get to a yoga class and it just doesn't feel right, try another class. So yeah, those are kind of just I guess that's my advice for people that are seeking something else. And yeah, if anybody's enjoying yoga outside, please wear bug spray and protect your there's mosquitoes out there, and I have Lyme disease. And if anybody wants more information on that, you can reach out to me, because I'm a big advocate for others with Lyme disease and people protecting themselves. So it's just one of the other hats that I wear. But yeah, hopefully sharing information, I probably shared so much, but hopefully sharing this information helps just maybe even one person who's like a little curious about how they can, find peace, find something, 'cause a lot going on.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like yoga can be a very grounding experience, especially if you do a lot of poses really close to the earth, or even doing yoga outside or doing it on a paddleboard, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Elyse, for being here. Thank you to those who are watching and or listening. And as always, I'll have a way for you to get in contact with Elyse if you have any more questions about anything. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks so much for having me.
Mhm.